Well, and there's some manufacturers in the state that if they hope to keep their ability to manufacture in the state, they
Yep.
probably ought to donate something too.
Yep.
Let's
Yeah.
get this circulated to those folks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell a little bit. We've just been having a good old time talking about guns, but why don't you tell our viewers before we get too far off the rails, and then we gotta end the show. Tell everybody exactly what your suit is. Like, what are your I don't know what's
Okay.
the right word? Your accusations,
Okay. So
claims,
yeah.
whatever.
So the official complaint hasn't been filed yet. Actually, it might have been. It's going in any day now. They
Okay.
were finalizing the final complaint, which is about 26, 27 pages long. It's a lot of legal, yada yada. But basically, the lawsuit alleges that the magazine ban from 2018 and the waiting period bill from 2023 are both unconstitutional. There are more gun control laws that have been passed in Vermont that can possibly be litigated further down the road. But as I understand, they see this as kind of the low hanging fruit to get a favorable ruling on under the new Bruin ruling and stuff. So they're going to start with this and see if they can push it through the Circuit Court of Appeals. And the other thing to consider with this is that there are similar lawsuits happening in other parts of the country in different Circuit Court of Appeals. So, for instance, if the suit making its way through the Ninth Circuit out in California makes its way to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court rules on magazine limits, then, it might be a moot point beforehand. But
Right.
the more of these lawsuits that get pushed, is the more chance you have of the Supreme Court taking up the case and it finally getting a favorable ruling on it. And this court
Yep.
is looking to take more cases on guns. Finally, you have regardless of how you feel about everything else, this Supreme Court has done. They're finally doing their job on Second Amendment rights after a century of
Praise
ignoring
God.
it. So we'll take
Yes.
it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so fantastic. So basically you're starting out with two of the laws that you guys think, or collectively have decided are the most likely to advance and be upheld. Is there a plan then to go after the next ones? Is there a vision for that down the line? Do we kind of feel like if those get struck down, then that sets precedent for the other ones? Do you know is there a plan?
In a perfect world, and now you're getting into legal stuff, and you remember I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a guy that reads a lot and has an interest in this sort of thing. But
Stayed at a Holiday Inn
right.
last
But
night.
the more favorable rulings and legal precedent that you get, that helps other issues, similar issues be decided in the future. But the flip side of that is you have a couple of activist judges, one in Connecticut and one in Oregon, who have recently released their own rulings that kind of put a spin on the Bruin decision from last year. I mean, really terribly reasoned, poorly thought out, very obviously trying to kind of take what the Supreme Court said about guns last year and spin it back the other way because they didn't like how it went for them. So, that muddies the waters and lengthens the process and complicates the situation and makes it more expensive for us, and et cetera, et cetera. But, the long-term plan is every, favorable ruling you get sets legal precedent, and that helps in the future. And we've seen a ton of them since the Bruin ruling last year, which, if you're familiar with that, changed the way that the courts are even allowed to look at Second Amendment rights. It used to be
Yeah.
a means end analysis, and the Supreme Court said, no, it doesn't matter. You're not allowed to use that
Good.
interest balancing analysis now. And, whether the lower courts listen to
Well,
them or not is another thing. But, that's
and there are a number. I think it is interesting. There are a number of different laws moving up various states. Benjamin, do you know where the one for the felonies is do we remember if we found out the felony one? So there's one, of course, that I've asked about, as I've been very open about. I have a criminal record from 15 years ago, a felony offense. And so
Yep.
I can't own a gun in Vermont anymore. And there is a court case making its way through the circuit that says if it's a nonviolent felony, you can't restrict someone's rights. Like, you have to restore them, or there has to be a means of restoration or whatever.
Yep.
And it's making its way up to the Supreme Court. So that's one that I'm looking at
Yep.
and watching, of course, because I'm very interested in that.
Sure.
It's like, oh, I did something stupid 20 years ago that was nonviolent and got the worst possible ruling because I was poor and couldn't afford anything other
You
than a
don't know
public
how
defender.
many people get caught up in that trap. I mean, I bet I can think of 4 or 5 people I know off the top of my head that is saying, I got one guy that I think he like stole a lawnmower when he was like 20 years old or something, and it was over a certain dollar amount, so it was a felony, right? And so he can't own a hunter rifle. The guy's 50 years old. He's the nicest guy you've ever met in your life. He hasn't been in trouble in 30 years, and he can't own a gun. Another guy I know ended up on the business end of the law years ago for growing marijuana. Right, had a few marijuana plants at his house. Got arrested, got a felony, can't own guns. Now you can go right to the store and buy weed. Now you think they give him his gun back?
Yeah, I was gonna say, now it's legal.
No, sir.
No, absolutely not.
And those.
You can't have your case expunged. The governor refuses to look at pardons.
Yep, it doesn't have to. They want as few people having guns as possible. It doesn't, and you're thinking like potheads, for goodness sake. The potheads running around shooting the place up all the time. I mean, those guys, you better take the guns away from those guys. I mean, the only thing they're a threat to is a carton of ice cream in the fridge. I mean,
that's the thing. Is we're gonna let cartels run the freaking legalized weed, whatever. But if you're a dude.
You talk about, and you don't want to put that tinfoil hat on too hard all the time, but you got to wonder, like, this isn't all by accident. There's no way that they can be this stupid and oblivious and just completely clueless to what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're trying to disarm the civilian population of the United States is what they're doing, and you'll never convince me otherwise. So